So, say hi, Chloe.
Hi.
This is Mr. Spitzer and Chloe, and we're going to teach you all about the events leading up to the War of 1812 today. We have our handy dandy PowerPoint here. We're going to go through 4 or 5 slides. The slideshow is up on the website. It's on Canvas, so you guys can go through it as you need to. So I'm not going to wait for you guys to take notes like you normally do, because most of you take forever. In fact, you guys are slower than my grandmother, who's been dead for 11 years. So as we start getting closer to the War of 1812, this starts during Jefferson's presidency. Jefferson's president. The country is starting to expand its trade. So overseas trade, while profitable, is risky. There's such things as pirates. Other countries try to stop our ships, so that's what this slide is talking about. Key points that you guys need to remember on this slide. If you see right here where it says British and French tried to stop the United States from aiding each other. Remember, England and France are involved in wars pretty much from about 1800 until 1815. The United States, if you remember, Washington said we're going to stay neutral. So we're neutral and we're supplying both sides with stuff. And so they don't like that we're supplying everybody else. So they stop our ships. A couple of incidents down here you see on this part right here is talking about the Leopard was stopped. It stopped the Chesapeake. That was a huge event, and it angered a lot of citizens. But what you're going to need to remember, this does not start war. Basically, the Leopard firing on the Chesapeake is an act of war, but we didn't go to war. We're a new country. We don't really want to get involved in this. So those are your important things you need to remember on that slide. If you have any questions, let me know. So, Chloe, you want to add anything to this? Probably not. Probably not.
Hey, I'm doing Europe right now.
Okay, so United States response. So first thing we do with all of the stuff that's going on with trade, we passed the Embargo Act in 1807. An embargo is basically stopping something from happening. So, excuse me, if I didn't like that, Canada won't sell me any of my Tim Hortons donuts that you guys know I love, I can embargo Canada, which means I wouldn't buy anything from Canada. Not exactly sure what else I would buy from Canada, but I wouldn't buy anything else from Canada. So we passed the Embargo Act, and it banned trade with all foreign countries, punishing both Britain and France. The real people it really hurt were American merchants, and so they were not happy with Jefferson. And it didn't really have any effect on Britain and France because they still traded with other people, so they were still getting their stuff. Really, the only people that were hurt by the Embargo Act were Americans. So definitely was not Jefferson's brightest moment, let's just say that. And then we have the Non-Intercourse Act, which replaced the Embargo Act. The Embargo Act was so unpopular, Jefferson and Congress decided, okay, we need to get rid of this thing. And so they did. And it banned trade only with France, Britain, and their colonies. So we could trade with other colonies. We could trade with, Denmark. We could trade with Holland. We could trade with Switzerland. We could trade with Sweden. We couldn't trade with Britain or France. U.S. trade would resume. The first side to stop violating American neutrality. So if they stopped bothering us, we would start trading with them again. It wasn't any more successful than the Embargo Act. So neither of these really solved the problem, but they were attempts. So while all of that trade stuff's going on, we got some issues inside the country dealing with Native Americans. As we moved west into the area that we took over from the Louisiana Purchase, the entire area is populated with American Native Americans. And so they didn't want us moving in. We wanted to move in. And so what happens is the governor of Indiana gets mad because Tecumseh, a Native American leader, and his Indian tribes attack some settlers going into the West. William Henry Harrison, who's the governor of Indiana at the time, gets mad, sends a whole bunch of army forces out, and they have what's called the Battle of Tippecanoe. Native Americans lose, and Tecumseh and his Native American tribes flee into Canada. The reason this causes us problems on a foreign policy front, the Native Americans in Tecumseh were supported by the British. So it aggravates the British even more. And so they start to give more help to the Native Americans. So really, you don't need all of this. What you need to remember about this is the Battle of Tippecanoe, Native Americans lost. It made Britain more angry with the United States and provide more aid to Native Americans. That brings us to what's going on politically. So the first two things we looked at, the first two slides, are talking about foreign policy. That's relationships between us and other countries. This slide is talking about stuff that's going on inside our country when it comes to politics. And what's going on here is we have a group called the War Hawks, and they felt we should go to war with England. They saw British support for Tecumseh and Native Americans caused us problems. All of these trade restrictions are causing us problems. And as I've always told you, America always wants to invade Canada for some reason. Maybe they really want Tim Hortons donuts. And so that's another thing that the Warhawks are wanting. They're wanting to invade Canada, take over Canada. There's an opposition to that. So basically, we're split between two sides. You got the Warhawks, which are largely people from the South and the West. And then we have the opposition, which are the peace parties, and they're from New England, and they oppose the war. Even though the British trade restrictions hurt New England's economy, they don't feel war is the answer. So those are the two opposing sides. You'll notice, as we've seen even from the early beginnings of colonization, there's a regional difference here. South wants war here. New England doesn't. This just continues the differences between the regions. We've talked about it before. Slaves in the South, they want certain things. Manufacturing in the North wants certain things. Here again, we see that they cannot get along. So what happens is Republican James Madison, who was the president at the time, he was elected in 1808. He won re-election in 1812. He heard this growing pressure from the Warhawks. It was starting to cause him political problems. So he sends and goes to Congress in 1812 and tells them that they must vote for war. Congress votes. Warhawks won. The United States declares war for the first time in its history. Madison was service commander-in-chief. There were a series of generals that we don't really need to remember, but as of 1812, with this declaration of war, we are now involved in war. So to summarize all of this stuff and all the steps that lead up, we have foreign policy issues going on, trades being impacted between France, ourselves, and England and ourselves. We have other domestic issues between Native Americans, England, and ourselves. And then we have the Warhawks and what they're called the Doves, which are the new people from New England. So that pretty much should go through the steps leading up to the War of 1812. Again, if you guys have questions, let me know. Oh, and by the way, our cats are making an appearance here. That's two of our cats, Chessie and Buttercup, and I have no idea what Buttercup is staring at, but looks like Buttercup has been possessed by the devil. So, and that is all here from the Dungeon of Education at the Spitzer household.